So we finally have the third and final part of Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths. If you saw my reviews of the first two parts, you know I wasn't a huge fan of either of them. I thought the first one was just a glorified prologue. It wasn't exactly abhorrently awful, but once again, it just kind of felt like a prologue that could have been done in about 15 minutes, not an hour and a half. And then part 2 was terrible from top to bottom. The voice acting, the animation, the story, the writing, everything about it was terrible. Nothing in it made sense, and it was just abhorrent. That one was abhorrently awful. This one, it's complicated. Because one thing I did notice with these parts is that nobody really seems to like any of these. I looked at the audience score for Rotten Tomatoes, because I don't look at the critic score, although I will bring those up too. This one doesn't have a critic score, at least yet, so I'll leave that out. But with the audience scores, Part 1 had 59%, Part 2 had 30%, and this one's at 50%. So it seems like everybody's just with the first part and the third part, everyone's just kind of, it was fine. But part 2, pretty much everybody can agree was awful. Even down to the critics, where I think both of them had 8 critic reviews. The first one was about 88%, so most of them seemed to like it, which I understand why people liked part 1. And then part 2 is at 17%, which means I think one person liked that one. So, you can kind of tell that it seems like what I thought of the first two kind of seems to be the consensus, where part 1 wasn't terrible, but it was pointless, and then part 2 was just awful. This one, it seems like they're a lot more split on this one. Personally, that's kind of what I thought as well. My two biggest problems with this one, in particular, were the voice acting and the animation. Now, this movie had some great actors in place. It had actors that I really like. Corey Stoll, who played Yellow Jacket in Ant-Man, was Lex Luthor. I don't know how they got him in this movie, but he does a pretty good job. Alexander Daddario finally got some more lines as Lois Lane, because she was in part 1 but had about 3 lines of dialogue, maybe. And there's some other actors that I recognize, like Stana Katic as Wonder Woman again. Her fake accent isn't very good, but... And for some reason, Katie Sackhoff was Poison Ivy, who had about 2 lines. Okay. And yes, I will get to Kevin Conroy in a little bit, because he's only in the movie a little bit, and this was his final performance as Batman, but I will get to him later. And it's not necessarily that the voice acting is awful. The problem is it feels like the read-throughs, which is, if you don't know, it's what happens when actors, when they first get together and just read the script. Like they do read-throughs of the script with just basically just sitting in a room and reading the script. That's kind of what it sounded like. It sounded like people were sight reading this, like they never read the script ahead of time, and were just thrown into the booth, given one take while reading it, and couldn't quite get the inflections right because they hadn't figured it out yet. That's kind of what the voice acting felt like in this movie. And then there's the animation. I have criticized the Tomorrowverse for its animation with every single one of these movies I've seen, because I haven't seen all of them. But I criticized it with Green Lantern Beware My Power. I criticized it with Legion of Superheroes, and I've criticized it with Justice League World, and I've criticized it with all of these. Because the animation is awful. I will give it credit that the colors are they're a bit more diverse this time around. It's less muted than it was with, say, Green Lantern or Legion of Superheroes. There's a bit more color to it with these, especially with part 1 with a lot of time traveling. But there are several times, not only does it screw with the action sequences, but it also screws with the expressions. There's so many times when the expressions are just wrong. Like, there's a big emotional scene between Kara and Cal right before the final confrontation with the Anti-Monitor, and once again, it's supposed to be like a deep, emotional scene. It almost seems like Kara is like smiling by the end of it, which is not the proper expression for the situation. And then so often that everybody's just kind of standing around with this dead expression on their face because they don't have the budget to actually make them emote properly unless they're the focal point of a scene. There's so often where even if they are the focal point of a shot, they will just stand there with no expression on their face. And then it also screws with the action sequences. Like, there's a scene with a bunch of Nazis who got into the Rogues' weapons, who got a hold of the Rogues' weapons, Batman's Rogues Gallery weapons, and a lot of them just have regular guns still, or some variation of a gun, and when Batman and the rest of the Bat family start fighting them, they don't shoot. They stand there and just watch them come hit them. Even when they're, not even when they're just in the background, but even still, they're just kind of standing around waiting to get hit. They're not even shooting their gun. Even when they see them, they're just running up to them and just waiting for them to attack. They don't fire their guns at any point. And that part isn't even just the fault of the animators. That's just the fault of, well, I guess it would be the fault of the animators, because they could have them shoot at them, but I guess that would be more the fault of the writer and director than it would be the animators. And and just like the other movies, it still has plenty of stupid moments. Like, I understand, like, when Aquaman wants to go back to his Earth as it's being destroyed, like, I get the sentiment is there, but you need all that, but I don't understand why. I don't remember who it was who sent him back, but I don't know why he agreed to send him back. You need all the help you can get here. Why are you sending him to just go die? And also, another problem I have with this is that I have no idea how much time is supposed to be passing, because Batman gets hit with fear gas about half an hour into the movie, and then a few minutes later he wakes up on it's not the watchtower, on the satellite. It's basically the watchtower, though. But he wakes up in that infirmary, and they say 10 days has passed. And it's only been a few minutes of the movie, so I have no concept of how much time is passing in this movie. And that's something that all three of these movies failed with, was making me feel the stakes. Especially Part 2 really failed in conveying the stakes, even though the stakes is the destruction of the entire multiverse. It almost feels like there's nothing at stake, which feels completely ass backwards, I know. I know how that sounds, but it's true. There's some of the biggest stakes you can have for a superhero project, and it almost still feels non-existent. Now, there were some cool aspects of this movie, like it does actually connect to the original universe, which was the DC animated movie universe, which ended with Apocalypse War, where we actually get to see what Barry Allen changed when he went back in time to reset the timeline. And apparently, it was killing baby Darkseid. Yeah, they literally ripped off the idea that was shot down in Avengers Endgame. And that part was kind of stupid, but I did like the idea of seeing what Barry did in order to reset the timeline. But, especially with John Constantine, this showed where the animation really took a hit, because it showed a shot from Apocalypse War, and it was glaringly obvious just how much of a decline the animation has taken between the two. So, and there's a few cameos throughout this, of course. Like, there's a Super Friends cameo, like, you know, the show from, the 60s, is that right? Nobody in there says anything, it just shows them as their universe gets destroyed. But I guess it was kind of cool to see the Super Friends. But then there's Kevin Conroy's last performance as Batman. And it also had Mark Hamill's Joker, and if you guys know me, you know I fucking hate Mark Hamill, because he's a piece of shit human being. But it was nice to hear Kevin Conroy as Batman one last time, especially since this is his last performance and not Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League. That's something that Kill the Justice League was trying to do, is like, oh, it's you have to go play this game because it's Conroy's last performance as Batman. Yeah, even if that had been his last performance, that would have been such a disrespectful final performance, where they literally just completely shit on Batman the entire time and make fun of him right before Harley Quinn shoots him in the fucking face. And then they tried to do a tribute to him at the end, which, again, just felt like a complete 180 from how they treated him throughout the game. And his dialogue here, it was decent. I think they could have done a little better with that, but I'm not going to complain because, again, anything was better than what they did with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League's Batman. So, you know what? I'll take it. And again, the ending just kind of feels anticlimactic. Like, there's this big Ex Machina device that can just fix everything. It was kind of set up earlier in the film in a passing line, but it's literally a machine that can make a wish come true. No, I'm serious, and it's not magic, it's apparently technology. And apparently, John Constantine's magic isn't enough to do it, so they have to sacrifice. Wonder Woman has to sacrifice herself in order to make it work. Why? I don't fucking know. She mentioned something about sacrificing something immortal, but where did that come from? And they had no idea that was even going to work, so if it didn't, she would have ended up killing herself for virtually nothing. So, there's that. Honestly, my favorite character in this movie was Dr. Fate. He actually had some of the funniest lines in this. He had lines that legitimately made me laugh. And his magic, he did some pretty cool stuff with it. I wish there had been a bit more to the action. Again, a lot of the action is just people just continuously shooting lasers at the Anti-Monitor while he does his, while he creates a bunch of antimatter waves to destroy the Earths. And again, he looked kind of cool here. But again, they did such a poor job of conveying the stakes. It doesn't help that I don't know any of these Earths because they rushed to getting to Crisis on Infinite Earths with us only knowing a few of these characters that show up. I mean, there's showing the Justice Society. I don't even think it was the same one from the World War II movie that I didn't even see, but I'm not even sure it was the same one. So again, I have no connection to any of these Earths. That was the main flaw with this 3-part Crisis on Infinite Earths movie, is that one, not only was parts 1 and 2 very poorly written, and this one was just mid, but they did such a poor job of conveying the multiverse-ending stakes, because I have no connection to any of these Earths, so I have no reason to care. So, part 3 of Crisis on Infinite Earths is going to get a C-, because it was better than the last two, but overall, combining all of the 3, part 1 being bad, part 2 being dog shit, and part 3 being mid, this one probably comes out to a D, because the highest was a C- and the lowest was an F, so I think D is pretty much right up the middle there. So, yeah, this was not great, and I don't know what they're gonna do with the rest of the Tomorrowverse, but I'm not gonna be interested. So that's all I got for Crisis on Infinite Earths, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.